I have a good friend who has twin girls, and they are in college now, and they are sharing a room at home when they are back from university. And one summer, she was like, I'm just not even going to say anything. I'm not going to get involved. And one twin continued to bring food into the room, just eating food in the bedroom, which you can have rules, whatever you want. I'm not going to judge you at all. I personally don't love that. Neither did my friend, but she was like, I'm just gonna let it be. And not long after, they started discovering ants, ants in the bathroom, ants at the whole upstairs level. And it was because all of the food that had been brought up to this bedroom. I mean, it just makes your skin crawl just a little bit, right? And the lesson or the story that I think that is so powerful for us in this is that disengagement causes problems. And it actually requires a level of bravery to show that engagement, to really dig in with people. It's a lot easier to ignore. It's a lot easier to disengage than it is to jump in with people and do the work of a brave leader. And Nicole Trick Steinbeck was supposed to be with us today. She has had a family emergency. So I am going to talk about being a brave leader and really what are the 5 engagement skills that help you practice that bravery. Because Nicole has her definition of bravery. I talk a lot about valor, and that valor is a strength of spirit that moves us to action in spite of fear. So, or even through the fear. And leaders, we're required to have that bravery. And what that looks like isn't just, I'm going to be brave. There are engagement skills that you need in order to do that work, in order to have the results that you want. So, I don't think, in fact, I know my friend did not want the ants in her house on the second story level. And I think you want the results of a more highly engaged team. You want more productivity to happen. You want a generally more joyful atmosphere at work and really more profitability. And all of those things come with these 5 engagement skills. So I'm going to go through the 5 engagement skills and talk about what do we need to cultivate in that space, and how do we create that and develop those skills? So the first one is really emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is a huge component of what we need to practice that level of bravery. And so first, you have to engage with your own emotions. You have to recognize when they're happening. You have to move through emotions in appropriate ways. And then you have to allow the space for others' emotions. And that is the thing I think that makes us the most uncomfortable, because we have this idea that we can kind of manage our own emotions. We can be like, I'm just going to put that away. I'm just going to put it in this box over here, or I'll wait to deal with that later, which sometimes that's what we got to do. But managing the ability to manage yourself when other people are experiencing emotions is the work of a brave leader. So this past week, I hosted a retreat for women leaders, and it's called the Joyosity Retreat. And I had a group of women in a room for 2.5, 3 days. And we had a lot of emotions, not because we're women, but because we're human. In fact, a lot of the people in the room don't really love emotions. And we had to practice through allowing emotions in the room and regulating our own. And that work happens when you allow space for emotions to occur. And there was one moment where a woman really started to tear up, and allowing that to be safe, to be okay, to not be shamed, to not pretend that was unproductive or inefficient, even though it feels that way, got her to a place as a leader where she figured out, like, something clicked for her when we allowed the space to work through, where are the tears from? What is happening? And being a leader who can allow space for emotions brings you to the depth of a problem. You don't always know what the problem is or where it is coming from, but when you can say, "Oh, this is the reason that emotion is so high," you actually make better decisions because you understand the root problem. So I'm kind of curious if you're here live. First of all, just let me know you're here live. But do you feel like you know how to manage your own emotions? Is that something you feel like you can do well? Do you want help with that? Or you're like, I feel like I can do my own okay, but I'm not sure what to do with other people's emotions. That can be that sticky wicket. As the leader, learning to engage with other people's emotions is really, really key. So, the second engagement skill, the first one is emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. And the second one is all those communication skills. So, emotions are how we connect with other people, it's how we make good decisions, and we regulate through that. Communication is how we kind of get anything done and create that space where we're all moving in the same direction. And one of the things that I harp on, I will get up on a soapbox all day long, is that the goal of communication is creating shared meaning. The goal of communication is creating shared meaning. That's what we're doing. So I have an idea in my head and I need to communicate that in some way to the other person so they get the same message that I have inside my head. I cannot think of who said this quote, but they say that every act of communication is actually a miracle. And if you think about it, it is. We've got these thoughts inside our heads that we then form shapes with our mouths that project out with our vocal cords that go through space and sound waves, hit someone else's eardrum, and then their brain interprets those sounds into a new picture inside their head. That's a lot. There's so many things in there that can go wrong. And in a communication model, there's noise, there's filters, there's biases, there's our personality, there's our expectations. All of that is happening while we're communicating. And the work of a brave leader is to get rid of this idea that, well, I said it is not communicating because the goal of communication is shared meaning. It's not, well, I said it, and then just expect other people to know what that means. The work of a brave leader is to communicate and ask clarifying questions, allow clarifying questions to happen so everybody gets on the same page. That is the goal of communication. It is shared meaning. That's how you establish goals, expectations, processes, from emails to casual conversations to even your company meeting where you are announcing things as a leader. Allowing space for communication to be the back and forth that it actually is the work of a brave leader. That's how you engage with people. And that's how we actually create the shared meaning. You can't have shared meaning without a little bit of back and forth. So, one little trick that is really powerful in a meeting. So, rather than saying, "Do you have any questions?" or "Come to me with your questions," either one of those feels very open. A better way to say that could be to say, "What questions do you have?" And when you say, "What questions do you have?" you are, one, assuming that people have questions. So you are welcoming that in. And then the second step to that is to actually wait. To actually wait. So, my first career was in education. And one of the things we're taught as a teacher is wait time. And 8 to 12 seconds is the amount of wait time that we need for that sound to hit our hit our brain waves, for us to process what we have heard, then formulate a question that in our minds, and then decide to ask the question. That is a lot of brain work. We don't think about it because it feels instantaneous to us, but that it does actually take a bit of time. So, as somebody who is wanting to engage with your people, when you ask the question, "What questions do you have?" and then you wait 8, 10, 12 seconds, you'll actually get the questions that you want. You'll find out where the confusion lies, you'll find out where people's fears are, you'll find out a different idea. All of that is powerful communication skills. So that's my little trick for you today. And then the third skill that you need to be a brave leader, and I sometimes think this is the hardest, is conflict resolution. Now, I could talk about conflict resolution for forever. I am a recovering conflict avoider. It's what my TEDx is on, that actually great relationships need conflict, teams need conflict. But solving and resolving interpersonal conflict is something that we all really like to run away from. Well, at least most people like to run away from. I don't know about you. I still have to decide that I'm going to enter into the conflict because conflict is going to happen. It is the normal human condition because conflict is the struggle between limited resources and differing goals. Conflict is the struggle between limited resources and differing goals. And there's always going to be limited resources. And until we're all on the same page, we're going to have differing opinions about how to share those limited resources. And so working through conflict in healthy ways is really the work of a brave leader, because your leadership is going to rise and fall on how well you handle conflict. I was involved in a leadership situation. I was on a leadership team, and our main leader, who was over the team, was conflict averse in some of the most damaging ways possible. And it created an environment of distrust. It created an environment of gossip. It created an environment of triangulated communication because nobody could say things directly. You had to go to somebody else because conflict was not welcomed and shunned. And that toxic work environment led me to leave education altogether, a new career entirely, because I had a leader who was so conflict averse. The work of a brave leader is to know that conflict A is normal, B, there are healthy ways to work through it, and C, the only way out is through. You can't avoid it and you can't just kind of jump over it. You have to go through it. Just like the song you sing with kids. Can't go over it, can't go under it, gotta go through it. We've got to go through conflict because everything that's really good is on the other side of a conflict, of hard conversations. There's more trust, there's more clarity, you often get better ideas, and you have more strength because you know we've done it before. We can get through this because we can do it together. So 1, emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. 2, basic communication skills. 3, conflict resolution. And number 4 is boundaries. Establishing and honoring limits is the work of a brave leader. It is how we engage with others. It's where we say, here's where we're willing to go, and here's where we're not willing to go. Here's where my role ends and your role begins. Here's where the workday ends and your personal time begins. Here's when availability happens. I was just talking with somebody about unlimited PTO. And if you have unlimited PTO, where are the boundaries? Everybody gets kind of freaked out about it. And we all struggle with boundaries because, again, kind of like in communication, we're like, well, I said it. You have to actually maintain the boundary as a brave leader. That engagement skill of allowing boundaries and limits in the workplace actually builds trust. It builds trust. So I just want you to imagine that or if you've ever been to like one of those really high overlooking situations, either the Grand Canyon, the Sears Tower, the Eiffel Tower, the London Eye, something that's really big and tall, and you're overlooking this space. You feel safe when you know there is a boundary that's going to protect you from falling off. So I love that kind of situation. I'll walk out onto the glass at the Sears Tower and look down over the Chicago River because I know that boundary is protected, and I can go to the edge and still feel like there is trust and safety. And that's what healthy boundaries feel like. We don't always love them because we want everybody to follow our boundaries and we don't want to have to pay attention to anybody else's because that's just, being human. But when we establish healthy boundaries as a leader for ourselves and we honor other people's, That actually builds trust. You'll get better workers. You'll have higher engagement on your team. They'll be able to do the work they've been designed to do rather than taking on all these other responsibilities because nobody has any boundaries and nobody understands where their role ends and others begin. And people are overlapping and duplicating work and resentment builds, all of that happens. So healthy boundaries are a really key piece to leading well and being that brave leader, because it takes a lot of bravery to say, I'm not going to check my email in our current culture. It takes a lot of boundaries to say, I'm not willing to take on that project. It takes a lot of bravery to do that. So boundaries are a key piece of engagement skills that demonstrate your valor and bravery. So emotional intelligence, communication, conflict resolution, boundaries, and the last one is decision making. Have you ever been in that space where I can't make this decision. I can't make this decision. I can't move forward. I always feel like an unmade decision is like a toddler hanging onto your leg. Currently, right now, we are having a car issue in our house. One of our cars broke down in December, and we haven't been able to figure out what to do with it. Should we repair it? Should we take it to a dealership? Can we trade it in even? Do we just need to cut it for loss and donate it somewhere? What do we do? Since December, it is like a toddler hanging onto your leg. And it feels, this unmade decision feels very unsettling. So there's a level of insecurity because we're not really sure how to move forward. Making clear decisions within an appropriate timeline is the work of a leader. Affected choices by identifying the root cause, gathering data, creating action steps after a decision that are based on your values or your organization's values. That's the work of engagement, because people can follow something then. When you're just out in the middle, you don't really know where to go if a decision hasn't been made. And sometimes we get caught in corporate spaces where we just have to wait on this person or that person. I mean, have you ever experienced that? Where you're just like, you're waiting on somebody else to make a decision. It feels like this thing taking up space in your brain, which leads to lower productivity, which leads to less creativity, less innovation, because we're waiting on something to get done. Or I don't want to bring that idea because no one's ever going to make a decision about it. It really hampers your people. It is better to make a quick bad decision and correct it with another decision than just to wait in that space. And I was working with a client recently as a one-on-one client, and her leader, she really struggles because her leader doesn't make decisions quickly. And she is a very decisive person. So it also steps on her values a little bit. But as we dug in, it's because it feels like nothing is stable, and not quite sure how to move forward means lack of productivity. That's why these engagement skills matter so much in the workplace. But you have to be brave to make a decision. You have to be willing to put out there, like, here's the direction we're going. And there are lots of definitions of leadership, but one of them is that people are following you. And in order for people to follow you, you have to have a direction. You have to make a decision on where you are going. People will appreciate that. Even if it's slow, but you're bringing people in, but you make decisions, it's not like you just make them on your own. You do bring people into your decision-making process, but knowing when to bring people in, knowing how to bring the right people in, but actually moving forward and getting there, that is the brave leader. That engagement skill matters so much. So these 5 engagement skills are a part of the Joyosity model that I use when I'm speaking or when I'm organizations at the retreat. This past week, we were working on some of them, but mostly in the explore part. But in the engagement part, you've got to have these 5 skills: emotional intelligence, communication, conflict resolution, boundaries, and decision-making. And when you start to exhibit those as a leader, you will see people have higher engagement. If you do an assessment, an engagement pre and post, you will see higher engagement. That engagement turns into people wanting to stay. It turns into people having more joy at work. It turns into more productivity and profitability, all because you actually focused on who you are as a human in order to be that brave leader that makes decisions, that manages your own emotions, that sets healthy boundaries, that is willing to work through conflict and communicates well with your people. All of that matters as a leader. So, in the story of the ants, The disengagement, my friend was realizing, she's like, I can't just disengage from this. I have to go in, even though I know that this one 19, 20-year-old daughter is going to be really angry and and this other one is going to feel a lot of shame. But I've got to figure out how to manage that. And so they had to first solve the ant problem and then make sure it didn't happen again. Took the engagement of her as the parent. And you aren't a parent at work, but you do have to engage with your people. You have to be willing to engage with the humanity in order to clear out the ants, to not have more problems. You will have far more problems as a leader if you disengage than if you move forward with humility and adjust as you go. That's the work of a brave leader. So I can't wait to hear what you think about this. If you're listening on the podcast, come back and check it out on YouTube later and make your comments, because I think we think about bravery as this kind of ethereal term when really it is broken down into a set of skills. You can learn to do this work, and it is powerful when you do it. Oh, I hope this was helpful for you today. I can't wait to see you all later. And if you are interested and you're like, I'm not quite sure how to do that, you can just book a 15-minute phone call with me. It's really fast. We'll get curious about where are you stuck with that and help you decide that decision-making skill. What's the next step? I know it takes a lot of bravery to hop on a call with a stranger, but I would love to do that with you. So it's at jenwhitmer.com/spark call. And it's a 15-minute phone call. And I would happily jump on the phone with you and help you figure that out. All right, everybody. Have a great Monday. So let me put my coach hat on for just a sec. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them. Connect with us to keep this conversation going. As always, I'm Jen Whitmer. Thank you for listening to Joyosity. I don't take for granted that your earballs have a lot of information coming at you. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It really helps more people join us in creating positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.